Welcome everybody to the first initiation video conference of the Melody study. As I said before, the video conference is going to be recorded so that we will upload the video to our website so that everyone can check the website and just see the video even if they were not able to join. Some housekeeping notes, of course, we've been working with Zoom for such a long time during the pandemics, so mute yourself if you're not speaking, and you can always use the chat and also the raise hand button so that we can have a nice discussion afterwards. And if you have any questions during the presentation, you can also write using the chat. After the presentation, it would be nice if you could send an email to Dr. Bilge Aktas. She's our international coordinator, and this is aktas@eubreast.com. Just saying that you have participated, and then we know you are you have been in the initiation video conference, so that you can open your study site as soon as the paperwork is done. And what does Melody stands for? Many of you are heads of your national steering committees or are very active in the steering committees. So you know that Melody is an acronym for Methods for Localization of Different Types of Breast Lesions. And my name is Maggie Banis-Paluchowska. I'm PI of the study. And I have seen online James Harvey from the IBRANET study group. This is a joint project between our two study groups, EU Breast and IBRANET. And the study is also supported by 4 societies or study groups, the Oncoplastic Breast Consortium, the AWOGIN, AGOB, and Senaturk from Turkey. And here you can see our steering board. And now I would give over to James so that he can present the rationale for this study.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm just going to give a little bit of background about what the Melody study is about. I'm sure most of you know much of this already, which is why you're here, but essentially about 50% of our patients need some form of localization because the tumors are too small, and we need some kind of device, obviously, to tell us which part of the breast to remove. Certainly in the UK, as of 3 years ago, about 98% of our patients had wires placed. And over the last 3 years, that has now changed. So now it's the opposite way around, that approximately 65% of patients in the UK now have one of these localization devices, which are on the screen. So wires we all know about. There are good quality data around intraoperative ultrasound, radioactive seeds, some data around radio-guided occult lesion localization, and good data around about wires, but there is limited data around the newer devices, so paramagnetic markers, magnetic markers, radar markers, and RFID tags. So the idea of the Melody study really is to give us some safety information around these newer devices. Can you move on the slide, Maggie? So yeah, I mean, I think this is just a fantastic collaboration. So here are the sites and countries that have signed up to Melody. So in green, the sites that are actively recruiting already. So yeah, congratulations to them. Yellows are the ones that are applying for ethical approval. The UK is part of that. And obviously there are obviously some other massive centres and countries planning to join in the future. So we've designed the study essentially to get approximately 1,000 patients into each arm of the study. So essentially 1,000 patients with wires, 1,000 patients with magnetic markers and so on, so that we can compare quantitative outcomes, such as the ability to remove the lesion, and also some qualitative data on what you guys feel about the localization technique you use. So this is not an interventional study. So we're really asking, if you are using a new localization device or an established localization device, we would invite you to participate and to put your patients into the device, but we are not asking you to change what you do for the purposes of the study. So if you use, let's say, RFID at the minute, we will be keen for you to join the study and put your data into the study. So I think, is Torsten going to talk about the outcomes of the study, Maggie?
Thorsten is actually in the OR, and he told me that he'll probably be not be able to join. So I would say, if you'd like, you can start with the outcomes, and then as you wish, I can take over.
Yeah, no problem. So the outcomes of the study, we've done a similar study through IBRA-Net, and we've kept the outcomes relatively similar so that we can pull the data at the end. But Melody will be a standalone study. So essentially, the primary outcome is basically, does the localization device what it intends to do? Does it get the target lesion out? And do we get a negative margin at the first operation? The secondary outcomes are around, does the patient need a reoperation? Does the new localization device mean that you take less tissue? Does the marker dislocate? Do we lose any markers? We're also interested in learning curves. So do you think outcomes improve as we go through the study? And we're interested in the difference in MRI artifacts between the devices, because there certainly are allegedly differences between the size of MRI blooms and obviously complication rates around each of the devices. So they're kind of basic safety outcomes, really, and to look at quantitative differences. We're also interested in qualitative differences. So asking you, really, what do you think about the device, pros and cons of the device, looking at different themes of things that are important to you. We're doing the same for radiologists. You know, what do you think about the size of the needle? How easy was it to put in, and so on? And then also, most importantly, patient-reported outcomes. So each of those last three qualitative measures have really not been collected anywhere on these localization devices. So this will be a first. So the inclusion criteria really are going to be malignant breast lesions that require a localization of some sort. It can be GCS or invasive cancer, and it can be a clip or a marker at the end of neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So it's really, did we get the lesion out? So the lesion could be a cancer, or it could be a clip. We had lots of discussions about which techniques would be included, and these are essentially what we felt were currently established techniques, current arms that we could recruit to. So if you are performing any of those on the screen, we would love you to get involved. So wire-guided localization, intraoperative ultrasound, magnetic seeds, well done Maggie, radioactive seeds, roll, radar localization, which is essentially Severscout, RFID tag, which is the localizer, or ink or carbon localization.
Thank you so much, James. So now Steffi Hartmann from the German team will take over. She's also on the board of the Axana study that many of you are familiar with, and she will guide us through the documents and the setup of the study site. So over to you, Steffi.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, I would like to give you a short overview about some organizational aspects of the Melody study, and I would like to show you how you can register for patients for the trial. Let's start with the documents. Usually each participating country has its own national steering committee coordinating all the study activities, and you will also get an email containing all the documents and informations that you need to participate at the trial. This email includes your site ID. You will get the current protocol and patient information and informed consent form. Also, the signature and delegation log that has to be completed by your study site and sent to your National Steering Committee to get all the access data for the trial. And you will also get a PDF file of the CRFs and the patient questionnaires. The access data for our registry and documentation system, our eCRF system, and also a user manual for this, you will get directly via UBreast once you've completed the signature and delegation log. Well, the National Steering Committee is distributing the site IDs for each study site at their country, and they have to complete an Excel file every time they have opened a new study site. This Excel file will also always, anytime a new study site is opened, be sent to melody@ubris.com. If you would like to register a patient for the trial, you have to create a patient ID. We kindly ask every study site to set up their own study binders where the subject ID log should be stored and all the study documents, including the informed consent forms of the patients. And on the subject ID log, you will find a table where you have to create the patient ID that you need to register the patient for the trial. The patient ID consists of the site ID. It's beginning with 2 letters that are specific for your country. Here, for instance, it's IT for Italy. Then the number of your site follows. And the last part of the patient ID you have to create at your study site on your own. This will be an ongoing number, meaning the first patient you include will be 001, the second one 002, and so on. And using this ID, you can start the ECRF documentation. Here you see the the subject ID log, this will be sent to your study site via email from your National Steering Committee and also includes your site ID. Here you should register all the patients that you include into the Melody trial, but please do not send this back to your steering committee or to UBRIS. This is only for your internal use. Please store it at your study binder. The best time point to recruit and register patients for the trial is at the outpatient visit once you are planning the surgery. It is important that after surgery, there's no more inclusion possible because the first patient questionnaire has to be completed very shortly after surgery. The ECRF system is a REDCap database that you can enter via this email. And you will also get a PDF file of the single CRF pages. And if you want to, you can use it for your internal documentation. But if you would like to register a patient, then you have to use the ECRF system. The access data will be sent to you from UBREST. And once you've logged into the system, then you will find the table, which is shown on the next slide. Where you will find all the patients that you have already registered for the trial, and you can use the patient ID that you've created to create a new or to register a new patient. And you can see within the table all the CRF pages that have to be completed for each patient. And different colors symbolize the different status of the single CRF pages. Once you've started the documentation within a CRF, then, but you did not yet complete it, the status will be incomplete and the button is red. If you have completed the page, you have to change the status at the bottom of the page to complete, and the color will change to green. At this time point, the monitoring team will start its work, and only if the monitor have found any inconclusive or incomplete data and created a query, then the color of the button will change to yellow. If the monitors found all the data within a page complete and plausible, then they will log this page, symbolized by such a log sign. It is important that please do not use the log functions on your own. This is only a function that should be used by the monitoring team. Once a query is created, the color of the CRF will change to yellow, and you should click on it and reopen the CRF and look for these small yellow speech bubbles. By clicking on these speech bubbles, the query will open and you can read it. And you should correct or complete the data within the CRF. and reply and comment to the query. And at this time point, it is important that please, you should not change the status of the CRF. It should remain unverified, meaning yellow, until the monitor has checked the data again. And if everything is complete afterwards, the monitor will change the status to complete and lock the CRF page. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steffi. So I will now take over and I will guide you briefly through our CRF. And there's always CRF in paper, PDF file, but as you have probably noticed, there are two PDF files. And this is very important because the CRF is different for patients undergoing neoadjuvant chemotherapy and for patients who receive upfront surgery. And nowadays, in many countries, some patients receive a short-term neoadjuvant therapy, like 2 to 4 weeks. For example, endocrine therapy. This is something that is becoming quite popular here in Germany. But we decided in the steering board that the cutoff is always 6 weeks. So if your patient has received a systemic therapy of any form, endocrine therapy or chemotherapy, that was longer than 6 weeks, please choose CRF neoadjuvant. If she received no systemic therapy before surgery, or if it was a short therapy, shorter than 6 weeks, you should choose CRF primary surgery. And this is very important because depending on this, the questions are going to be slightly different. The first CRF page that you will be filling out are basic data that you actually know from other studies. So whether the informed consent form has been signed, how old the patient is, and so on and so on. We also ask you about implantable devices like pacemakers or defibrillators, because we know that there might be some interference, and it is actually quite an interesting aspect to analyze later. So this is why we have included this question. There is also an optional question on the race or ethnic group. Actually, many sponsors are very interested to support studies that look at diverse populations. So this is why we decided to include it. This is completely optional, and you can use the UK classification. You can also use US categories. So feel free to choose whichever you would like. You can also leave this question open because this is completely optional. And then we ask you about the systemic therapy. So based on this answer, you will know that you should go on with the CRF that you have started, or maybe you should switch to another one. So this is something that is very important. Then we ask you about the total number of lesions to be removed. And as James mentioned, we are not only interested in very straightforward unifocal lesions, but also in multifocal or multicentric lesions. And this is important because we will ask you about the number of lesions, but also a number of separate specimens to be removed. And here I have included some pictures to guide you through this. So let's say our patient has a unifocal invasive breast cancer, one lesion that you can see upon imaging. So this is quite straightforward. You will answer one to each of these questions. We have one lesion, and this will be one specimen that will be removed. But imagine this patient. She has a trifocal carcinoma. As you can see, she has received 3 clips. And in this case, I plan to perform an oncoplastic surgery. I will be removing a larger part of her breast, but it will still be one specimen. So I'll be having my 3 lesions in one specimen. This is how I'm going to answer these questions. And then you might also have a patient who has 2 lesions that are separated from each other that you plan to remove in 2 specimens. So in this case, you will have 2 lesions and 2 separate specimens that you will be removing. And this is important because this will influence the number of CRF pages and number of questions that you will be receiving. So please always think about how you're going to operate your patient. And obviously, if these are 2 separate lesions that you'll be removing via separate incisions, for example, then you have to answer the question about the number of separate specimens with 2. Then comes CRF2A, and this is the part that is specifically for the lesion or the lesion group that you'll be removing in one specimen. So let us think about the patient who has a trifocal carcinoma, where we want to remove all lesions in one specimen, in one tissue. So this will be our breast lesion group 1. In this case, I will have just one specimen, so I only have to complete the part about breast lesion group 1. And here you will be asked how many lesions does this specimen contain? The answer will be 3. We have 3 lesions in one breast lesion group. Then you'll be asked some questions about the result of the minimally invasive biopsy. And if you know all these answers, you can complete it here. I know that in some countries you will not have probably all the data from the core biopsy, so just leave it open. We want this study to be quite straightforward and not very resource consuming. Then comes CRF2, and here we ask you about the diagnostics. And of course, if you have not performed one or more of these imaging modalities, you just leave it open. You answer not performed, and you'll be asked about mammography, ultrasound, MRI, PET-CT, whatever you do, but always answer not performed if it has not been performed, and then you can just skip the questions. There's no mandatory imaging, so whichever you do in your clinical routine, we're happy about. You will also be asked about the size of their largest target lesion. So if you think about the patient with the trifocal carcinoma, here we want to know how large the largest of these 3 lesions is. But you don't have to measure anything in addition to what your radiologist or diagnosticians already do. If you have only 2 measurements, we're happy with this. If you have just 1, we're also happy with this. So here a short example. I have 2 lesions that I will be removing in one specimen, a bifocal carcinoma, and one lesion is 10 millimeter, the other one is 7 millimeter. So I will be writing this here. Largest target lesion is the one with 10 millimeter diameter. And then if we have more lesions than 1, as in this case, you might also receive from your radiologist the diameter of all lesions together of the lesion group. If you have these data available, feel free to fill it out. So here in my case, it would be 24 millimeters of the whole lesion group. But if you do not have this data, just click on not reported or not applicable, which is completely okay. So now we move over to CRF3, and this is a marker placement at time of minimally invasive biopsy. Sometimes, in some countries or at some study sites, there will be a clip or a marker placed directly in one procedure at the time of core biopsy or vacuum biopsy. So if you have done this, you will have this separate CRF page, but if you have not done it, you just skip it and then you don't have to write down anything. So this is quite nice because for most of the patients, you will just skip specific CRF pages that makes the documentation shorter. Here, if you have placed a marker, a clip, for example, a coil, or any form of other probe-guided detection markers, we will ask you about the type of it. And this is very important for us because we cannot mix up the markers. So this will be very important to know which marker exactly it was. If you have chosen clip or a coil, please try to be specific. Try to write down the manufacturer or brand. Then there is a short part about a marker placement before biopsy and surgery. And for those of you who use these new techniques that James was talking about, radar, magnetic, paramagnetic, RFID, this is the CRF that you will be completing because usually you do not place them at the time of the minimally invasive biopsy, but at some time point before the surgery. It might be 1 day before surgery, it might be weeks before surgery, but this would be the most important CRF for you. So here, again, the question, which type of a marker was it? Please check what marker you are using so that there's no confusion about what you have used. If you work with the roll technique, so the radio occult lesion localization, radioactive type of localization, you would be probably using technetium. So this is why we have also this answer here. But also any other localization device that you might have. If you're using a marker that is not included here, you are still allowed to use it, but you would have to tick other and then write down what you have actually chosen to use. And here comes the first questionnaire for the radiologist or anyone who has placed this marker. In some cases, this might be the surgeon or maybe a radiographer or maybe a gynecologist like here in Germany. So these are just 2 questions. First, how easy was the marking procedure? And second, how satisfied are you with the method used in this patient? So just 2 quick questions. And of course, you can write down if you have any improvements or any ideas about the development of the marker that you can write down here. But for most of us, this would be just the 2 questions to answer. This questionnaire, these 2 short questions are in the CRF file, but they can also be downloaded as separated files from the Melody website. So whichever is best for your study site, you can choose. For example, at my study site, we decided to give these separate questionnaires to our radiologists so that they do not have to fill out the whole CRF, but only the part that is necessary for them. Then for those of you that use a wire, which is still the most popular technique worldwide, there is a CRF that you can skip if you have not used the wire, obviously. And here there are some questions that you'll be asked. For example, when have you performed the wire localization? In most cases, it will be probably the morning of the surgery, but sometimes the wire is placed one day before or even at another time interval. So this is why we ask about this. And then comes the surgery. And this is the CRF that has always to be filled out, obviously, independently on which localization technique you have chosen to perform. First, the total time of the surgery. And here many of us have asked us if we really want to know the whole time. Yes, because this is the easiest to measure. You don't have to measure anything else in addition. We don't want to know the time of the localization itself. We just want to know the whole time between incision and skin closure. And obviously for patients receiving reconstructive surgery or maybe bilateral surgery and also surgery of the second breast, we know that this time will be longer. So we will be able to consider this as a co-founding factor when we're going to do our analysis. And of course, at many sites, there will be oncoplastic breast surgeries performed. So here there are 2 questions that are very important for us. First, have you performed oncoplastic breast surgery in this patient? And second, did it impact the resection volume? Because obviously, we remove more tissue if we plan an oncoplastic procedure, like a reduction mammoplasty. So for these patients, we will not be able to analyze the resection ratio because the surgeon tries to remove more volume that is absolutely necessary. And this is why we included these questions as well. And then if there was more than one marker, for example, a marker placed in the axilla and the one in the breast, or maybe 2 in the breast, we will also ask you if there were any problems in distinguishing the markers from each other. There might be a problem using the new detection techniques if the markers are, for example, in 5 millimeter distance. So this is why we asked about it as well. And if you have performed MRI before marker placement and surgery, there will be a separate question about this. You have heard from James, there are MRI blooms when you use some of the markers. Here as example, it is a magnetic marker. So obviously we're very interested in artifacts and any problems that might have occurred due to MRI. Then there is a question for the surgeon about the intraoperative localization. And here we ask what kind of technique you have used. So it might be that you have combined the techniques. Let's say you have placed a magnetic marker, but you have also performed intraoperative ultrasound. So you have visualized the lesion during the surgery using a probe that is covered in sterile sheath. So you would tick here both options, but try to be specific and try to avoid any confusion when it comes to the names of the probes that you are using. If you have performed intraoperative ultrasound, and there are many sites that use it as standard, they usually do not perform any other localization technique before surgery, but some of them decide to place a wire once the patient is sleeping, so under sterile conditions. If you have done so, you can answer yes to this question, but these patients will be evaluated as intraoperative ultrasound cohort. And there's a very short question that is important for us because we want to analyze the learning curve. How many procedures using this specific technique has the surgeon already performed? But please note that we're not interested in names of the surgeons. So data protection is obviously very important. We just want to know the number. And then there are 2 questions for the surgeon himself or herself. Also 2 very short questions. First, how easy was the localization procedure? And second, how satisfied are you with the method that has been used in this patient? And again, if you would like, you can also write down here any improvements that you might wish to see in this method, but else it will be just 2 short answers to 2 questions. Then histopathology, very important because of course we want to know if we have removed the target lesion. So this is the most important question. Has the lesion or the lesion group removed at first surgery? And also, what was the histology? Because sometimes it might happen that you had invasive cancer, open core biopsy, and then you have only DCIS in the surgical specimen. Or sometimes you might have problems removing the target lesion. And this is why you can also write down these problems here in this question. Another important aspect, we all know that sometimes the markers can get lost. So this is why there's this question about markers, whether they have been all removed of the first surgery or not. Very important for us for the later analysis. And the margins are going to be documented here. So in case of invasive cancer, we will ask you whether the margins have been cleared. So no tumor on ink is the definition that we use in this study. And this is very important because not all countries use this definition. I know that in some countries you try to reach 1 millimeter, for example. So of course, we will be performing different analysis when it comes to the margins. But when we talk about negative margins, it will be always no tumor on ink. And then you have the possibility to write down the minimum margin so that we also have the number. Then if you have performed shaving margins or re-excision, we'll be also asking if there was any tumor left in the re-excision specimens or in these shave margins. And it might be invasive, it might be in situ, or maybe there is no tumor tissue in the re-excision specimens. And also, we would want to know if the margins have already been negative in the main specimen. So this is actually something that's very interesting to know whether the re-excision has led to negative margin or whether you already had negative margins in your main specimen without the necessity of performing re-excision or shaving margins. And the last CRF is the CRF concerning histopathology of all lesions. So if you have multiple lesions that are going to be removed in separate specimens, in the end, you have just this one CRF where you document all of them together. The T stage, the N stage, number of removed lymph nodes, very basic data. So let's look again at patients with complex lesions. In this case, a bifocal carcinoma that is going to be removed in 2 separate specimens. Each lesion group is going to be documented separately. So using the eCRF, you will actually have double CRFs. You can always add a new CRF page. And then in this case, you will see that you have some of the CRFs for each of the lesion groups. It's actually quite easy. I must say we have already started recruiting at my university and we do not have that many complex lesions removed in different specimens, but still for these patients, it's actually quite straightforward to document them. The CRF6, the CRF about the surgery, you have to fill out only once. So please do not get confused because in the system you will see 2 pages for the CRF6. You don't have to fill out both. It's just one CRF for a 6 for the surgical part. And then coming back to the patient report outcomes, the short questionnaire for the patient. The patients should complete this questionnaire after the surgery. So some of them will probably be doing this directly after the surgery on the first day maybe, but you can also ask your patients to do it before surgery and the first postoperative visit. The questions are quite easy. 16 questions. It's going to take around 5 minutes, and they all refer to the time before surgery. And this is very important because we have so many different markers. Some of them are going to be placed weeks before surgery. The wire will be placed in the morning of surgery. And for intraoperative ultrasound, you do not need any formal localization technique. So this is why we have described it, this process to the patient in the questionnaire so that the patient is not confused. You have 2 options to deal with these questionnaires. Of course, you can print it out, you can give it to the patient, collect it from the patient, and then transfer everything to the eCRF, which is quite time consuming and would not be my preferable form of doing this. So this is why we have included option 2, and this is really elegant. So as soon as you have registered the patient, you will see the possibility of the PRO survey, patient report outcome survey, in your language. This is a screenshot for my study site. So we have here PRO in German. we click on the patient questionnaire, and then you can choose a survey option, namely survey access code and QR code. So you just click on this, and then you receive this, and you can print it out, and there's a QR code. There's also a link if the patient doesn't use a QR code. You just give it to the patient, and she can fill it out on her smartphone, her PC, whatever. You don't have to do anything else with the patient-reported outcome questionnaire. So this is much, much easier. In my study site, the person that spoke about the study to the patient does register her directly afterwards, and then prints it out and gives it to the patient and asks the patient to fill it out after the surgery. And my junior doctors that visit the patients after the surgery on the first day, they again ask the patient and remind her that she should fill out the questionnaire. But that way is much, much easier than using the printed version of the questionnaires. And if you have any questions, most of you have already been in touch with Dr. Bilge Aktas. Bilge is our international coordinator at EU Breast, and she's also the person that has sent to you all the documents, and you can always ask her anything. She's always available under melody@eubreast.com. And that's it. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to discussing this with all of you. So, and are there any questions? I'm going to check if someone has raised their hands. I don't see any raised hands. Yes, Antonio.
Hello, Melody. So congrats for the presentation. I have a short question because I'm not sure if I got it right. But you said if we put a wire in the OR under ultrasound guidance, that means we're going to count the patient as an intraoperative ultrasound.
Yes, it will be a cohort of intraoperative ultrasound combined with a wire. But this will be different. This will be different from patients who have received a wire as their main localization method. I know that your side, you're very, very strong with intraoperative ultrasound, so we would not want to mix it. We would not want patients having intraoperative ultrasound without wire preoperatively to be evaluated as one cohort.
That's it, because I mean, even placing a mark on the skin under ultrasound will be counted as intraoperative ultrasound when it's not an intraoperative ultrasound. So I think it could be very important to make it clear what is going to be like pure intraoperative ultrasound and other types of intraoperative ultrasound.
So intraoperative ultrasound is defined as actually using ultrasound during the surgery. It has to be in the sterile sheath. I love this technique. I've spoken to Isabel a lot about it. I'm doing this. I've been doing this for years. So for me, intraoperative ultrasound means I am actually performing ultrasound during the surgery. Obviously not the whole time, but intermittently to check the margins. So patients who have received ultrasound shortly before surgery, maybe with the skin marking, but that then no ultrasound during the surgery, are not intraoperative ultrasound.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
I think we're on the same page when it comes to this. So are there any more questions? There are 3 countries that have started recruitment, and now you in Spain, you have also everything and you are ready to go. And I see some colleagues from other countries who are still waiting for their ethical approval. Tove, Denmark.
I just have a question because we sometimes put 2 different types of markers in the same lesion. So could they be included or not?
Yes. What kind of markers would this be?
This would be a radioactive iodine seed, but if the one end of the lesion is near the nipple, there could be interference with the radioactive tracer for the Sims node procedure, and there we would put a magnetic marker.
Sure.
It's not that often, but there could be a situation with 2 different markers in the same lesion.
Yes, so you can do this. You are allowed to do this, and you can also. It's a multiple choice question, so you can of course choose both. Would it usually be one day, one procedure of placing both markers inside?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this is not a problem.
Okay.
So Rufina has asked me in the chat, do we have to translate ourselves the patient outcomes related to our own language? Yes. So the national steering committees are in charge of translating, but the patient reported outcomes consists of, as I said before, 16 questions, and some of them are a validated questionnaire. So for this validated questionnaire, There are many translations available. It makes it easier, but the rest will have to be translated, yes. For those of you who have multiple languages used in your country, this can be a challenge, but you can always contact us and we're very happy to help. Rufina, I think you're from Pakistan.
Thank you.
From
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And Veronica Fabiano has just asked using a chat, how does she know whether the QR code has actually been used by the patient? This is a very good question. You will see this. This is really nice. You print it out, you give it to the patient, and after the surgery, you just see that it plopped as green. So once the patient has completed the questionnaire, you will be able to see it. And that way you can also remind the patient if you see that she has not done it.
Thank you.
Where are you from, Veronica?
From Argentina.
From Argentina. Okay, very nice. Yeah, this is actually a really nice improvement using this QR code, because else you have to print it out, someone has to collect it and then transfer the answers. It's quite time consuming. So we're really happy when we discovered that REDCap has this QR code thing. I can see a question from Dr. Lubna Fora. We also need to get ERC approval from our institution before accruing patient for the study. Yes, obviously, you always have to have the ethical approval, and also in your country that there has to be established the National Steering Committee. So I'm not quite sure. Lubna, where are you from?
I'm from Pakistan, from Aga Khan University Hospital.
Okay, so in your country, Professor Mamunir Khan is the head of the National Steering Committee, and first, always the National Steering Committee applies for approval, because once they have ethical approval, it's much easier for other study sites to submit it. At least in most countries, this is the best way to do it.
That's right.
So do you work with Professor Khan? Is it the same institution?
No. The
Okay.
different institution, me and Dr. Rufina are in Karachi, Pakistan, and we are working there. Dr. Munir is in Peshawar.
Okay, so Professor Munir is your main contact and the person that you should ask about the progress of the ethical approval, because once you got it, you could submit.
Obviously, can I apply to my institution also?
That's great.
Great. Thank you so much.
So are there any more questions? I'm just checking if we see any raised hands. James, would you like to comment on anything?
No, I think you've done a fantastic job, Maggie. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we have no more questions, thank you so much for joining. It was really fantastic to see so many of you here. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us via melody@eubreast.com. And I'm really happy to see that so many of you have already submitted to the ethical committee. Yeah, we should all work together towards the nearly 8,000 patients that we're going to enroll in the next years. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.